What happens when an undercover CEO steps into his own company to see how his customers are being treated? For Ethan Caldwell, the CEO of Caldwell Home Supplies, the answer was eye-opening. After receiving troubling complaints about rude employees and poor customer service, he decided to go undercover as a new hire to witness it firsthand. What he uncovered was shocking. Employees treating customers with disrespect and prioritizing sales over genuine service. But Ethan wasn't about to stand by. Instead, he took action to ensure customers like Martha were treated with dignity, and he set out to fix the toxic culture that had taken root. Stick with us to see how this undercover CEO turned the situation around and restored integrity to his business. Ethan Caldwell had built Caldwell Home Supplies from the ground up, turning it into one of the most trusted home improvement and furniture chains in the country. For years, he had taken pride in knowing his business provided quality products and exceptional customer service. However, lately, things had started to change. Anonymous complaints had been pouring in, emails from frustrated customers describing rude employees, pushy sales tactics, and a general lack of care. Some even claimed they were outright dismissed if they didn't seem profitable enough. Ethan found it hard to believe. His company had always been built on integrity, yet the reports suggested that somewhere along the way, those values had been lost. Rather than relying on secondhand reports or distant managerial oversight, Ethan decided there was only one way to find out the truth. He had to see it for himself. But not as the CEO. If he walked in wearing a suit, employees would put on their best behavior and he wouldn't see the real problem. Instead, Ethan devised a plan. He would go undercover as a new warehouse assistant, Eli, blending into the daily operations of one of his busiest stores. By stepping into the shoes of an entry-level worker, he could observe firsthand how customers were being treated and whether the concerns were valid. So, on a quiet Monday morning, dressed in jeans and a simple work shirt, Ethan walked into one of his own stores. No fancy title, no VIP treatment, just another new hire. What he didn't know was that by the end of the day, he wouldn't just confirm the complaints were true, he would uncover a toxic culture that needed to be torn down from the inside out. Ethan stepped into the Caldwell Home Supply store, blending in as just another new employee. The moment he crossed the threshold, he sensed something was off. The atmosphere wasn't welcoming. It was rushed, tense, and chaotic. Employees moved around the store with little enthusiasm, avoiding eye contact with customers, and the front desk was a mess. The ringing of phones echoed through the space as Jessica Moore, the store's receptionist, juggled multiple tasks at once. She barely had time to glance at Ethan before motioning toward the back without much introduction. "Warehouse staff clock in over there," she muttered before answering another call. Her tone wasn't rude, just exhausted, as if she had long accepted that she was always one step away from being completely overwhelmed. Pushing forward, Ethan walked onto the sales floor, where he was supposed to shadow the sales manager, Kyle Bennett. Kyle was everything Ethan had feared, a tall, overly confident employee who carried himself like he ran the place. Leaning against a counter, Kyle barely looked up from his phone when Ethan approached. "Oh, you're the new warehouse guy. Whatever, just stay out of my way," he said, giving zero effort in onboarding a new team member. Ethan nodded, masking his irritation. He had worked at the lowest levels of his company before, back when he first started Caldwell Home Supplies, and he knew the difference between casual arrogance and a complete lack of care. Kyle was showing the latter. It didn't take long for Ethan to spot the real problem. Customer service was inconsistent at best and dismissive at worst. While some customers were attended to, others were ignored completely if they didn't seem like big spenders. Employees weren't guiding shoppers toward the right products, but rather pushing expensive items without concern for actual needs. A few times, Ethan caught Kyle brushing off customers with half-hearted responses and forced smiles, only to turn around and joke with his colleagues as soon as they walked away. The culture here was clearly profit-driven, not service-oriented. Ethan clenched his jaw, keeping his cover intact, but inside he was already fuming. This wasn't how his company was supposed to operate. He had expected to see some level of decline in customer care, but what he was witnessing was worse than he imagined. And then, just as he was debating his next move, the store's next customer walked in, a moment that would change everything. Ethan was still assessing the dysfunction around him when the next customer walked in, a frail-looking elderly woman with careful steps and a folder clutched tightly in her hands. Martha Reed, as he would soon learn, had the kind of presence that some employees might overlook, but Ethan immediately noticed the way she hesitated near the entrance, scanning the store as if she wasn't sure whether she even belonged there. Her clothes were neat but well-worn, and there was something about the way she held on to that folder, as if its contents represented months of careful planning and saving, that made Ethan take an extra second to observe. Jessica, despite her exhaustion, managed a polite nod toward the sales floor, signaling for Martha to approach the nearest associate. Unfortunately, that associate happened to be Kyle Bennett. Ethan barely had time to brace himself before Martha cautiously approached the counter where Kyle stood, his phone still in hand. "Excuse me," she said in a soft, hesitant voice. "I'm looking for a recliner. Something small but comfortable. I don't have much space, and I was hoping to stay under $400. Kyle glanced up, barely suppressing a smirk. $400, he repeated, loud enough for nearby employees to hear. A couple of them snickered, and Ethan felt a pang of irritation. "Yes," Martha said, clutching her folder tighter. "I've been saving for a while." Kyle let out a small chuckle and shook his head. "Yeah, well, we don't exactly do thrift store prices here. You might want to check second-hand shops." Ethan's stomach twisted in anger as he watched the hope drain from Martha's face. Her lips pressed together in embarrassment, and she took a small step back, like she was used to being dismissed. "I see," she murmured, her voice barely audible now. "I'm sorry for bothering you." As she turned to leave, Ethan could feel something inside him snap. Enough. Before she reached the door, he stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice calm but firm, "are you looking for a recliner for yourself?" Martha hesitated, glancing at him cautiously. "Yes," she said, her voice softer than before. Ethan nodded. "We might have something that fits your budget. Let me check." Kyle let out an exaggerated sigh, rolling his eyes. "Oh, come on, Eli. We don't have time for this. She's not going to buy anything." Ethan turned to Kyle, his jaw tight. "Actually, it's our job to help every customer, isn't it?" His words were sharp, but his tone remained measured. Kyle narrowed his eyes at him but said nothing. Ethan then turned back to Martha. "Give me a minute," he said gently. "I promise I'll do my best to help." For the first time since walking in, Martha looked like someone actually saw her. Ethan didn't waste a second. Turning away from Kyle, he walked straight to the front desk where Jessica was still juggling phone calls and paperwork. "Jessica," he said, keeping his voice low so Martha wouldn't feel like a spectacle, "can you check the inventory for any recliners under $400? Clearance, floor models, open box items, whatever we have." Jessica blinked in surprise. It wasn't often that anyone actually made an effort for lower-budget customers. Still, after a glance at Kyle, who was watching with his arms crossed and an amused smirk, she hesitated, but then nodded and began typing. Kyle scoffed loudly. "You're wasting your time, Eli. We don't have anything worth selling in that price range. And even if we did, why bother? She's probably just window shopping." Ethan felt his blood simmer, but he kept his expression neutral. "We'll see," he said simply. Martha stood nearby, her hands clasped together, looking as though she wasn't sure if she should stay or just leave and avoid further humiliation. Ethan turned back to her with a gentle smile. "Are you looking for something specific? A certain size or style?" She hesitated, but then said, "Just something small and comfortable. My apartment is tiny, but I have a bad back, so I need something that supports me." Before Ethan could respond, Jessica looked up from her screen. "We actually have a floor model recliner that was recently marked down to $375. It's in great condition, just missing the original packaging." Ethan's chest tightened with relief. "That sounds perfect," he said. "Where is it?" Jessica pointed toward the back section of the store, and Ethan turned to Martha. "Would you like to take a look?" Martha's eyes widened slightly, as if she was waiting for someone to tell her it was too good to be true. I suppose so." As Ethan led her toward the back of the store, Kyle laughed under his breath. "You're really playing the hero today, huh?" he muttered. Good luck closing that sale. Ethan ignored him. This wasn't about a sale, this was about doing the right thing. When they reached the recliner, Martha's face softened. She reached out and ran a hand over the fabric, then slowly eased into the seat. A small sigh escaped her lips. Ah, this is comfortable. Ethan smiled. If this works for you, we'll get everything sorted. For the first time since she entered the store, Martha looked hopeful. Ethan was just about to finalize the sale when Kyle stormed over, clearly annoyed. All right, that's enough of this charity act, he said, folding his arms. You're not even supposed to be selling, Eli. You're just a warehouse grunt. Let the real salespeople handle this. Martha's expression tightened, her fingers gripping the armrests of the recliner. Ethan could see she was used to being dismissed, used to people like Kyle treating her as if she didn't matter. Ethan exhaled slowly, then stood up straight, looking Kyle directly in the eye. Kyle, he said in a calm, steady tone, do you really believe that some customers aren't worth your time? Kyle scoffed. I believe in making real sales, not wasting time on people who can't afford quality products. That's how this business works. Ethan nodded slightly as if considering Kyle's words. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek business card, and held it up. Interesting perspective, he said, his voice laced with finality. But that's not how Caldwell Home Supplies works. And as its CEO, I'd say my opinion carries a little more weight. The entire store fell silent. Jessica froze mid-typing. Martha's eyes widened in shock. And Kyle, his smug expression vanished instantly, replaced by a look of absolute panic. Wait, Kyle let out a strained laugh, shaking his head. You're joking, right? Ethan simply held his gaze. Do I look like I'm joking? Kyle opened his mouth, but no words came out. He shifted awkwardly, his usual confidence draining as the reality of the situation sank in. Ethan turned away from him and back to Martha, his voice gentler now. Martha, let's get that paperwork started. She nodded slowly, still processing what had just happened. Kyle, meanwhile, stood frozen, his entire career flashing before his eyes. Ethan turned back to him one last time. Kyle, take the rest of the day off, he said firmly. We'll be having a serious conversation about your future with this company tomorrow. With that, Ethan walked away, his authority now undeniable. Ethan didn't waste time. The moment Martha was taken care of, he turned back to Jessica, who was still watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. Jessica, he said, his tone now all business, can you gather the entire staff in the break room? We need to have a meeting. She blinked, hesitating for only a second before nodding. Of course, Mr. Caldwell. The whispers spread quickly. Employees exchanged nervous glances as they filed into the break room, their usual casual chatter replaced with a tense silence. Kyle sat near the back, arms crossed and jaw tight, clearly trying to recover from the humiliation he had just suffered. Jessica and a few other employees sat near the front, looking both anxious and hopeful. Ethan stepped forward, placing his hands firmly on the table. He let the silence linger for a moment before speaking. I started Caldwell Home Supplies because I wanted to build a company that prioritized integrity, respect, and service. But what did I saw today? He shook his head, his expression growing serious. It didn't reflect those values. His gaze swept across the room, landing on Kyle, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat but said nothing. I watched customers get dismissed because they didn't seem profitable enough. I saw employees like Jessica being overworked and undervalued, and I saw a culture that puts commission over customer care. And that's unacceptable. Jessica's eyes widened slightly, and a few employees nodded subtly as if relieved someone had finally acknowledged the problems. Ethan continued, his voice unwavering. Starting tomorrow, every single employee in this store will undergo mandatory customer service training, no exceptions. Our job isn't just to sell, it's to help. And if you can't handle that, then you don't belong here. A few murmurs rippled through the room. Kyle rolled his eyes, but this time he stayed quiet. Ethan then turned to Jessica, softening his tone. Jessica, I saw how hard you were working today, juggling multiple things at once without support. That's changing. We'll be hiring additional front desk help to ensure you and the rest of the staff aren't stretched so thin. Jessica let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, nodding quickly. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Ethan gave her a small, reassuring smile before turning back to the group. These changes aren't just about today. They're about fixing this company from the ground up. I'll be personally checking in next week, and I expect to see improvement. The room remained silent, but there was a distinct shift in the air, a realization that the company they worked for was about to change for the better. As the meeting ended and employees slowly trickled out, the weight in the air seemed to lift, not entirely, but enough to signal that a shift had begun. Ethan remained near the front of the store, watching as his staff returned to their stations, some appearing deep in thought, others looking relieved. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but the first step had been taken. Before he could leave, Martha approached him, her recliner purchase now finalized. She held the receipt and keys to the delivery pickup in her slightly trembling hands, looking at Ethan with grateful eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice quiet but full of emotion. "I came in here expecting to be turned away, just like every other time. But today, someone actually saw me." Ethan felt a pang in his chest, a mix of satisfaction and regret. How many other customers had walked away feeling invisible before today? He gave her a small smile. "You don't have to thank me, Martha," he said. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter their budget." Martha nodded, her smile growing, and with one final grateful glance she turned and walked toward the exit, her posture lighter than before. Ethan watched as she left, knowing that she wasn't just leaving with a chair, she was leaving with dignity. As he turned back to the store, Jessica stepped forward, clearing her throat slightly. "Mr. Caldwell," she started hesitantly, "I just wanted to say, it means a lot, what you did today." Ethan looked at her and saw something new in her expression. Hope. She wasn't just relieved for herself, but for the store, for the company. "Call me Ethan," he said with a small smile. "And trust me, this is just the beginning." Kyle, still lingering near the break room, watched silently, his usual cocky smirk absent. He knew his days of unchecked arrogance were over. Ethan glanced at his watch. He had come in as Eli, the warehouse assistant, but now, as Ethan Caldwell, CEO, he was leaving with a mission. His business had lost its way, but today proved that it wasn't too late to fix it. As he walked out the door, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement, Ethan took a deep breath. This wasn't just about one store. This was about restoring integrity to everything Caldwell Home Supply stood for, and he wasn't going to stop until every customer who walked through those doors was treated the way they deserved to be. The story of Ethan Caldwell highlights a crucial lesson in leadership, integrity, and customer service. A business is only as strong as the values it upholds. Ethan built Caldwell Home Supplies with the intention of providing quality products and respectful service, yet over time, those principles were lost in the pursuit of profit. By going undercover, he witnessed firsthand the toxic culture that had taken root, one where customers were dismissed based on their spending power, and employees like Kyle prioritized sales over human decency. The biggest takeaway from Ethan's journey is that true leadership isn't about sitting in an office. It's about staying connected to the people who keep the business running. When CEOs and managers distance themselves from the day-to-day experiences of employees and customers, they risk allowing a damaging culture to grow unnoticed. Ethan's actions proved that real change starts at the top. By holding his staff accountable, providing proper training, and ensuring every customer is treated with dignity, he set a new standard for his company. This story serves as a reminder that profits should never come at the expense of respect, and that businesses thrive when they prioritize people over numbers.